The weak believe that goodness will be rewarded. They wait for fairness, for justice, for others to see their worth. But the world does not bend to virtue. It bends to power. And if you lack it, your honesty, kindness, and effort will all turn into chains that bind you. Today, we will uncover the ruthless truth, why the world only bows to power, and how you can rise above illusion to command respect, not beg for it. You've worked hard, you've been loyal, you've played fair, yet others with less talent and less integrity stand above you. You feel invisible in a world that rewards manipulation over morality. But what if you could see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be? This is where Machiavelli begins. He doesn't promise comfort, he promises clarity, and from clarity comes control. Power is not a choice, it is the currency of survival. From the moment you are born, the world begins to test how much of it you possess, in your tone, in your confidence, in your silence. People might pretend to value morality, virtue, or kindness, but beneath every handshake, every alliance, every smile, lies one unspoken question. Who holds the power here? The truth is, society bows only to those who can command it, not through words, not through wishes, but through force of presence. Look around. The loudest voices are not always the wisest, the richest are not always the most talented, and the respected are not always the most deserving. Yet they are obeyed. Why? Because they project power. They know how to make others feel smaller in their presence, not through cruelty but through dominance. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He watched how rulers fell not because they were hated, but because they were weak. Weakness invites chaos. When a leader hesitates, the vultures gather. When a man seeks approval, the crowd loses respect. Power, on the other hand, creates order. It silences debate. It makes people align, not out of love, but out of necessity. You see, power is not only about control, it is about perception. People follow those who seem untouchable, because deep down, every human craves protection. When you appear strong, they want to stand beside you. When you appear weak, they abandon you to save themselves. The world's loyalty is never moral, it is strategic. Think about your own life, the boss who intimidates everyone, even when he speaks softly, the politician who wins despite his lies, the influencer who says nothing profound yet commands millions of followers. They all share one thing, the aura of dominance. Their flaws are forgiven, their mistakes are ignored, because the human mind is wired to submit to strength. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's quiet. It walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere. It doesn't beg for attention. It claims it. You can feel it in posture, in timing, in restraint. Machiavelli believed that real power begins within, in the mind that refuses to be ruled by fear, guilt, or the opinions of others. Once you stop seeking validation, you start to command it. People talk about fairness, but fairness is a myth told by the powerless. The world is ruled by hierarchies, in politics, in business, even in friendships. There are leaders and there are followers, predators and prey. And the line between the two is drawn by who holds the leverage, the one who can make others lose something. Status, security, comfort will always be respected more than the one who can only give. That is why Machiavelli said, "It is not enough to be good, you must be feared for your strength, because fear, unlike love, cannot be faked." Fear builds structure. It creates clarity. It ensures that when you speak, people listen. Without power, your words are noise. With power, your silence becomes a command. So when you move through the world, understand this. People do not respond to your intentions, they respond to your influence. They do not care if you are right, they care if you are strong. The world has never been a place of fairness. It is a theater of dominance, and those who understand this truth do not complain about injustice, they use it. Power doesn't mean tyranny. It means control over yourself, your image, your decisions. It means knowing when to strike, when to retreat, and when to stay silent. It means understanding that kindness without authority is weakness, But authority with restraint is respect, and it begins not in the throne room but in your mind, in the moment you decide that you will no longer live reacting to others, but make others react to you. Because whether you are a ruler or a worker, a friend or an enemy, a leader or an observer, the world only listens to one voice, the voice of power. And until you learn to speak that language, you will always be silenced by those who do. Power begins in perception. It is not what you possess, but what others believe you possess that shapes your influence. The world is not ruled by truth, it is ruled by illusion. Machiavelli understood that the masses are not philosophers. They do not see deeply, they only look, and in what they see, they form belief. Appearance becomes reality, and reality bends to it. When you walk into a room, people begin to judge before you've spoken a word. They scan your posture, your tone, your confidence, and in seconds they decide if you are to be respected, ignored, or used. If you hesitate, they sense weakness. If you project certainty, they surrender to your energy. That is the nature of human psychology. It bows not to facts, but to confidence. Machiavelli wrote that it is far safer to appear virtuous, powerful, and wise than to actually be those things. Why? Because perception controls reaction, and in this world, reaction defines power. The one who controls perception controls the outcome. You do not need to hold the sword, only to convince others that you can strike at any time. Every powerful figure throughout history has mastered this art. Kings wore crowns not just for decoration, but to remind the crowd of their supremacy. Generals marched in armor not merely for defense, but to create an image of invincibility. Even today, leaders, influencers, and businessmen wear the modern crowns, the perfect suit, the calm expression, the calculated silence. These are not random details, they are weapons of perception. The illusion of power protects you before you even act. It makes others cautious, hesitant, careful with their words. And that hesitation gives you control. When people believe you are strong, they behave differently around you. They doubt their attacks, they question their judgment, they restrain their disrespect, all because of a mask you chose to wear. Machiavelli would tell you, the world does not care what's behind your eyes, it only sees what's in front of them. And if you appear confident, competent, and fearless, they will treat you as such, even if inside you are calculating every move with doubt. This is not deception, this is strategy. You are managing perception the way a ruler manages his court, carefully, intentionally, and without apology. Think about this. How often do people succeed not because they are better, but because they look more certain? The confident fool is obeyed more easily than the uncertain genius. That is the tragedy and the brilliance of human nature. We trust appearances more than truth. And those who understand this rise. Those who do not fade quietly into frustration. To appear powerful, you must learn control over your body, your expression, your reactions. Never show desperation. Never show panic. When you speak, let silence frame your words like stone frames a statue. When you are attacked, do not rush to defend yourself. The truly powerful never explain. They let their reputation defend them. When you lose, do not show defeat. Display composure, and your enemies will wonder what you're planning next. Even your mistakes can be reshaped through image. If you act as though every failure was intentional, people will doubt their own judgment before doubting yours. That is the art of appearing powerful, to turn uncertainty into mystery and weakness into strategy. The more they cannot read you, the more they fear you. This is why Machiavelli said, men judge more by the eye than by the hand. They see before they think, they respond before they reason. So give them something to see, something that commands them, even if you are not yet what you appear to be. Because once the illusion of strength is established, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When others treat you like a leader, you begin to think like one. When they defer to you, your confidence grows. Perception fuels reality, and soon, what began as an act becomes your nature. That is how power is built, Not in a single act of domination, but in the consistent shaping of how others perceive you. Every gesture, every silence, every decision should whisper the same message: I am in control. And when you live by that, something strange happens. People start to believe it before you even speak. They start to see what you want them to see. They start to follow. And that is how appearance becomes truth, and truth becomes power. Kindness is a beautiful thing, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon, not against others, but against yourself. The world loves to preach compassion, humility, and forgiveness. Yet, behind the surface of this moral theater, something darker operates. People do not respect kindness that comes from weakness. They exploit it. They interpret it not as goodness, but as vulnerability. And the moment they sense you will not fight back, they test how far they can push you. Machiavelli understood that in a world ruled by self-interest, kindness is only powerful when backed by authority. A man without power, who tries to please everyone, becomes the easiest target for manipulation. His good heart becomes his noose. He gives chances, he forgives, he tolerates. Not because he is wise, but because he is afraid to lose approval. And the world, sensing that fear, feeds on it. You've seen it yourself. The employee who works harder than everyone else, yet never promoted. The friend who helps everyone, yet is forgotten when he needs help. The lover who gives endlessly, yet is abandoned for someone colder, more mysterious. It's not because kindness is wrong. It's because kindness without power loses its value. People only appreciate what they fear losing. And if you are too available, too forgiving, too eager to serve, they believe they already own you. In Machiavelli's world, and in ours, kindness must be measured. It must be calculated. A ruler should be merciful, but only when that mercy strengthens his position. Kindness should serve as strategy, not as weakness. When given from strength, it inspires loyalty. When given from fear, it invites betrayal. That is the difference between a ruler and a servant. Think about lions and lambs. Both exist in nature, but only one commands respect. The lion can show mercy, because his claws remind everyone what he's capable of. His kindness is a choice, not a default. But the lamb, no matter how gentle, is forever prey, not because it is kind, but because it cannot defend its kindness. Humans are no different. When people see that you will not enforce boundaries, they will test you until there's nothing left to take. So ask yourself, is your kindness a weapon or a weakness? Do you give because you choose to, or because you fear what will happen if you don't? Power transforms kindness from fragility into force. When you have control, your acts of compassion are seen as grace. But when you have none, your compassion becomes invisible, or worse, contemptible. Machiavelli believed that goodness must serve power, not replace it. A leader who tries to be loved by everyone ends up respected by no one. Because love given freely is easily forgotten, but strength, even when feared, is never ignored. To be kind in a cruel world, you must first learn to be dangerous. You must have the ability to inflict harm, but choose not to. That choice is what gives your kindness value. When you are capable of punishment but show mercy, it's seen as power under control. When you have no means to punish and still forgive, it's seen as desperation. People do not admire endless patience. They admire restraint backed by capability. A dangerous man who shows kindness commands reverence. A harmless man who shows kindness is treated like a tool. The truth is, the world does not hate kindness. It just doesn't respect it when it's unguarded. So you must learn to separate emotional generosity from strategic generosity. Help those who strengthen you. Forgive those whose loyalty benefits your future. Be kind in a way that builds alliances, not drains your energy. Because if your goodness weakens your position, it is no longer virtue. It is self-destruction disguised as morality. Machiavelli's wisdom cuts deep here. It is better to be feared and then loved, than loved and then disrespected. Kindness is a gift, but only when it is given from a throne, not from the ground. The moment you let others see your kindness as endless, you have handed them the map to your limits. and once they know where those limits are, they will press on them until you break. Emotion is the easiest chain for the world to place around your neck. It blinds your vision, twists your judgment, and makes you react instead of rule. The greatest downfall of powerful men is not their enemies. It is their inability to master their own emotions. Anger, love, guilt, envy. These are tools your opponents use to control you. When you allow your feelings to lead, you surrender the throne of your mind to chaos. And Machiavelli knew that the man who cannot command himself will never command others. The art of power begins with detachment. To detach is not to be cold or heartless. It is to see clearly. The emotional man believes he is acting from passion, but in truth, he is being played by it. When you feel insulted, you want revenge. When you feel rejected, you crave validation. When you feel fear, you shrink back into safety. These impulses make you predictable, and predictability is death in the game of influence. The wise ruler hides his emotions behind strategy, because the moment his feelings are visible, others can use them as weapons. Imagine a ruler who shows rage in public. His enemies know how to provoke him. A leader who shows desperation. His rivals know how to manipulate him. Even in personal life, the one who can remain calm while others lose control always wins. Detachment is not a lack of humanity, it's the highest form of intelligence. It means you no longer dance to the rhythm of other people's emotions. You decide when to respond and when to remain silent. You act according to strategy, not impulse. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to act against his emotions when necessary. He must know how to be cruel when the situation demands it, and merciful when it strengthens his power. Compassion without calculation leads to ruin. But calculated compassion, given at the right time, in the right measure, creates loyalty and fear at once. The balance between the two is mastery. Look around you. Most people live as slaves to emotion. They love too quickly, they trust too easily, they hate too loudly. They reveal everything in the heat of a moment, their fears, their weaknesses, their insecurities. And when they do, the world quietly takes note. The emotional person is always at the mercy of the calculating one. That is why those who rule do not react. They observe, they study patterns, wait for timing, and strike when emotions have clouded everyone else's judgment. To detach is to rise above the fog. It allows you to see human nature for what it is: selfish, impulsive, fragile. Once you understand this, you stop expecting purity and start predicting behavior. People become easier to manage when you stop taking them personally. Every betrayal, every insult, every disappointment becomes information. You stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this to use later?" That is emotional power, turning pain into data and data into control. The strongest individuals in history were not emotionless. They were emotionally disciplined. Julius Caesar could forgive enemies to turn them into servants. Napoleon could stay calm while his empire burned because panic never builds strategy. Even Machiavelli himself, exiled and humiliated, wrote The Prince not out of bitterness, but out of cold clarity. He transformed defeat into timeless power. That is what detachment creates, the ability to convert chaos into order. The emotional man reacts and regrets. The detached man observes and decides. When you can stand in front of anger and remain calm, when you can face betrayal and still plan, when you can feel the storm and stay unmoved, you have achieved what few ever can, because real control is not over others, it is over yourself. Once you conquer that battlefield, every other one becomes easier. Detach from the noise, step out of emotional warfare. See people not as enemies or allies, but as moving parts of a larger design. Use empathy as understanding, not weakness. Use compassion as a tool, not a burden. You must rule your emotions the way a king rules his kingdom, with boundaries, with awareness, with discipline. Only then can your decisions carry the weight of power, rather than the shadow of impulse. Mercy is a luxury reserved for those who have already secured their power. For everyone else, hesitation is fatal. Machiavelli wrote that when you strike your enemies, You must strike in a way that leaves no possibility of retaliation. Half measures are the playground of the weak. They create resentment, they leave survivors, and survivors remember. In politics, in business, in relationships, the enemy you spare today will sharpen his knife tomorrow. To crush a threat completely does not always mean with violence. It means with strategy so decisive that opposition dies before it even begins. Power does not tolerate uncertainty. The moment you allow doubt, others begin to sense it. They start testing your boundaries, probing your limits, measuring how far they can go without punishment. This is where most people fall. They think that a single warning or small punishment will stop disrespect. But people do not learn through words. They learn through consequences. If your retaliation is mild, they interpret it as weakness. If it is final, they remember it as a lesson written in stone. Machiavelli saw this truth unfold in courts and kingdoms. A ruler who pardoned his rivals often woke to see their rebellion rise again. A commander who showed mercy on the battlefield soon faced those same enemies at his gates. History repeats this pattern endlessly. Because mercy without fear breeds betrayal. The world does not pity restraint, it exploits it. To crush threats completely, you must first learn to identify them early. They rarely appear as open enemies at first. They come disguised as allies who question your judgment, as friends who gossip behind your back, as subordinates who quietly undermine you. At first it seems harmless, but like poison, it spreads silently until it's too late. The Machiavellian mind notices small patterns before they become large problems. It observes loyalty with suspicion and compliments with calculation. Not because it is paranoid, but because it understands human nature. Those who envy you will eventually turn on you, unless you give them a reason to fear doing so. Crushing a threat does not always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means isolation, cutting off resources, influence, or access. Sometimes it means outsmarting, exposing, or replacing. The art is in making your strike clean, silent, and final. When your enemy disappears, people must only whisper about what might have happened, not see your hands covered in evidence. Fear works best when it travels through rumor. Let others think that those who cross you simply fade away, and they will learn to stay in line. In personal life, the same principle applies. When someone disrespects you, set a boundary that cannot be mistaken for kindness. If you allow small violations, they will grow bolder. If you let insults slide, they will escalate. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. The moment you make an exception, you lose authority. That is why Machiavelli advised rulers to handle threats swiftly and decisively. Not because cruelty is noble, but because hesitation invites chaos. There is a psychological truth buried inside this philosophy. Human beings understand extremes more than balance. They remember what shocks them. When you make an example out of one act of defiance, you prevent 10 future acts. When you punish with clarity, you prevent confusion. People do not respect softness, they respect certainty. And certainty is born from action that leaves no doubt. Machiavelli knew that forgiveness is only effective when it comes from strength. A ruler who forgives too easily looks afraid to confront, but a ruler who crushes a threat completely and then shows mercy later is feared and respected at once, because everyone knows his forgiveness is not weakness, it's control. You cannot maintain power in a world that tests you constantly unless you show that testing you comes with a price. You must make it clear that betrayal will never bring reward, that opposition will never end in compromise. The fear of consequence is stronger than the desire for rebellion. And when that fear exists, peace follows, because the world bows not to good intentions, but to decisive strength. Power built in silence is the kind that lasts the longest. The loud rise draws too much attention, too many enemies, and too many eyes waiting for a single mistake. But the one who builds quietly, patiently, beneath the noise of the crowd, grows untouchable. Machiavelli understood that visibility is both a weapon and a trap. When people can see your every move, they can plan against it. When they don't, they live in uncertainty, and uncertainty keeps them cautious. In the pursuit of power, noise is weakness. Every time you boast, every time you reveal your plans, you hand your rivals a map of your mind. You tell them where to attack, where to undermine, where to wait. But when you act without announcement, when you build your empire under the cloak of silence, they never know what's coming. And fear thrives in the unknown. The silent strategist is always underestimated. Until it's too late, Machiavelli would have called this the art of invisibility. He saw how rulers who bragged about their greatness invited rebellion, while those who acted in secrecy rose without resistance. Because people fear what they cannot predict, silence in the realm of power becomes a form of intimidation. It makes people wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you know that they don't. That mystery becomes your armor. The quiet rise is not about shyness, it's about control. It means speaking only when necessary, revealing only what serves your purpose, and letting the results of your actions speak in your place. You do not need to convince others of your strength if they can see the outcomes of it. The Machiavellian mind knows that attention is a currency, and the one who spends it recklessly becomes broke in influence. The wise invest it sparingly, making every appearance meaningful. Observe how the most powerful people rarely speak of what they're doing. They move through rooms with calm precision. They listen more than they talk. They let others underestimate them, because being underestimated is the most strategic disguise of all. It makes others careless, confident, exposed. And while they're busy revealing themselves, you are studying, preparing, positioning. Power, built in silence, is not rushed, it's designed. There is also strength in unpredictability. When no one can read your intentions, they cannot counter your plans. They hesitate, they speculate, they fear your next move. That hesitation gives you control without confrontation. You don't need to shout to be feared. You don't need to explain to be respected. The one who keeps his mouth closed and his eyes open controls the battlefield long before the war begins. The modern world tempts you to broadcast everything, your progress, your ambitions, your success. But in doing so, you make yourself predictable. You give the envious the blueprint to sabotage you. You give competitors time to prepare. Machiavelli would tell you this: never show your full hand until you are ready to win. Let your silence confuse. Let your patience mislead. And let your sudden success break the illusion they built about you. Building power silently also means mastering self-control. The urge to prove yourself is an emotional trap. You want to be recognized, appreciated, validated, but the need for recognition weakens your focus. Every time you explain your worth, you lose a piece of it. Every time you react to doubt, you confirm it. Silence, instead, keeps you unpredictable. It turns your progress into a riddle that others can't solve. And that mystery makes your presence heavy, magnetic, and dangerous. Think of the river. It flows quietly, carving mountains over centuries. It doesn't roar about its power, yet nothing can resist it. That is how your influence must be, subtle but unstoppable. You build quietly, you plan discreetly, and when the time comes to reveal what you've created, it shocks the world. People will say it happened suddenly, but you will know the truth. It was built piece by piece, day by day, under the protection of silence. Machiavelli believed that the most powerful victory is the one your enemies never see coming. When you rise without warning, there is no time for resistance, no time for sabotage, no time for envy to take root. By the time they recognize your power, you already stand above them. And the irony is, your silence will make them speak of you more. They will fill the void with stories, myths, and assumptions, each one building your legend higher. The lesson is simple but brutal. Never announce your power. Let them discover it. Never reveal your ambition. Let them feel it. Power that is seen can be challenged. Power that is unseen can only be feared. And when you master that silence, you no longer need to chase recognition. Your success will make enough noise for you. Power is not earned by kindness nor granted by fairness. It is taken through clarity, discipline, and the unshakable will to dominate your own world. Machiavelli would tell you that humanity has not changed since the 1500s. Only the costumes have people still admire virtue, but they follow strength. They still praise humility, but they obey those who command. The world you live in is not built on fairness, but on hierarchy. Those who rise to the top do not beg for recognition. They create it. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. They don't hope for influence. They build it through control, perception, and decisive action. Every time you hesitate, someone stronger shapes your reality for you. Every time you seek approval, you place your fate in the hands of those who will exploit it. Machiavelli's truth was never about cruelty. It was about clarity. He stripped away the illusions of moral comfort to show how things truly work. If you wish to survive in a world ruled by manipulation, strategy, and fear, you must become more strategic than those who use them against you, because in the end, life does not reward purity. It rewards power. The world bows only to those who command it. Not to the dreamers, not to the good-hearted, not to those who wait for justice, but to those who understand that control is the foundation of peace, that fear is often safer than love, and that respect must be taken, never requested. So remember this: when you step into the world, do not ask it to be kind. Make it recognize your presence. Make it bow.